I mean, at $10 a pound now, and a 1,000 milligram bottle, each one of those bottles, out of the $100 retail, 45 cents of that is going back to the farmer.
That's Jay Stucky. He's a CBD grower from New York State. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. Thank you for listening to today's show. So, Jay Stucky has many concerns about the hemp industry. You know, from the high price of CBD to processors seemingly rigging the system, to why 0.3% THC is just fine for responsible growers. So we go on quite a journey today, so buckle up. And then after the interview with Jay, I talked to Scott Bennett. He's the hemp policy expert at the American Farm Bureau Federation, whose delegates recently voted to support allowing THC levels as high as 1% in hemp. So we're going to take a quick sponsor break and then come back with a few nuggets of hemp news and then get into the interviews. This episode is brought to you in part by King's Agri-Seeds, your source for premium forage, cover crop, and now industrial hemp seeds. King's is excited to offer Auto CBD, an auto flower variety that comes to full maturity in 75 days, allowing for early harvest and succession planting. Avoid the harvest and process bottlenecks by adding Auto CBD to your lineup. Call 717-687-6224 or go to kingsagriseeds.com/hemp for more information. This episode is sponsored by Lancaster DHIA's Hemp Survivors Workshop, February 27th in Smoketown, Pennsylvania. Designed to help you make sense of 2019 and make a plan for 2020, the Hemp Survivors Workshop gets into the economics of hemp, harvesting and processing, how the new rules affect variety selection, plus a discussion of safety testing consumables, because the public needs to know if your product is safe. Register now for Lancaster DHIA's Hemp Survivors Workshop. Call 888-202-3442. Okay, some hemp news. The Associated Press is reporting that Newcastle, Delaware-based Agro Refiner LLC is seeking a permit for a hemp extraction facility that would be in an existing warehouse in Newcastle. The operation would have a maximum extraction capacity to process about 78,000 pounds of dried hemp each year and produce about 7,000 pounds of pure CBD for wholesale distribution. West Virginia's Department of Agriculture has just recently submitted its plan for hemp to the USDA. The Commissioner of Agriculture, Kent Leonhardt, he says there is a lot of discussion surrounding the rules proposed by the USDA. Many states have concerns, including West Virginia. For our state's industry to continue to grow, we have to work with our federal partners to create a business-friendly environment for producers. All right, good luck, West Virginia. Here's a story from Kentucky, reported by the Lexington Herald Leader. Kentucky hemp companies face bankruptcy as bureaucratic paralysis plagues industry. The story goes on to say that two Kentucky hemp companies, one in Winchester and another in Louisville, are facing bankruptcy proceedings following months of cash flow problems. On January 24, three creditors filed an involuntary bankruptcy petition in federal court in Lexington to force Gencana into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Gencana has offices in Winchester and is one of Kentucky's largest hemp companies. The company has 21 days to file a response to the petition. Back in October, I interviewed some of the farmers involved in this dispute. You can go back and listen to episode 57, published on October 30th, 2019. All right, here's a story from Forbes.com. It's titled, "A Certified Organic Labeling Program is Coming to Cannabis in 2020, written by Katie Shapiro. So the story talks about the Cannabis Certification Council and how back in December at the annual MJ BizCon in Las Vegas, the Denver-based standard holding body quietly announced an industry-wide cannabis certification program. This in-depth, years-in-the-works labeling system will apply a CCC, organically grown sticker, on qualifying products in addition to all cannabis labeling already required by law, which varies by state. Here's a story out of New Jersey from NJ.com. The story is called "You Might Be Overpaying for CBD and There's No Reason Why." And then it goes on to talk about a recent analysis from Leaf Report, an organization focused on transparency in the CBD industry, which found a 32,000% price discrepancy between some of the least and most expensive products. And they also found no reason for the differences. So this story plays pretty well into today's interview with Jay Stucky. So I'll post a link to a bunch of these stories on the show page for this episode. And speaking of this episode, let's get on with it. Jay Stucky, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm a transplant from the Midwest. I came here to manage an organic vegetable farm, and after a couple of years of banging my head against the wall trying to make ends in that industry, hemp kind of came on the scene. We were I took part in the first year of growing with Cornell.
Okay.
Came here originally to the Hudson Valley, I guess. That's where we got our start with hemp, and kind of went through a little bit of the learning curve that first year. Learned a lot. Of course, didn't make anything due to the timing and the scenario. And we revamped some things, and I don't remember how many business plans we wrote up the first year during the off season, trying to find what direction we were going to want to take. But then in 2019, we planted about 50 acres and harvested all of it.
And this is CBD hemp?
Yes.
Okay.
And like most, our first year was definitely a mixed bag. We purchased 70,000 feminized seeds that first year, and only 6,000 were actually feminized.
Whoa.
So we had to very quickly kind of adapt to what we had for a reality. And of course, we had pollinated crop, of which everybody told us, or all the information at the time anyway, said that was going to be a valueless crop. But at the end of the day, it wasn't. There's actually a fair amount of CBD there. We had to figure out how to get seeds out, which of course there wasn't any commercial mechanism to do that on a reasonable scale. Everything's designed to take the seed out, but everything else is garbage. Well, really, for our purposes, it was more the inverse was true. We developed our own method for getting that part done, and then we were sitting on a fair stockpile of what we thought was valuable biomass. We were one of the first that was certified organic in New York for hemp. Then we started trying to find an extractor that would work with us. And we didn't have anywhere near the capital to try and have that extracted. And then, of course, made into something retail or whatever to push it down the line to get what we felt was the actual value out of it.
So how much biomass were you talking about?
We had about 35,000 pounds at the end of the first year.
And can you talk about sort of the like the COA stuff? What were your percentages?
Our percentages came back at about 6.5.
Okay.
This wasn't what I would call well-trimmed flour either.
Okay.
There was a lot of because of our harvest method. I mean, we harvested roughly 50 acres with a very minimal crew, and basically completed harvest in 17 days.
You were hustling.
Yeah, that's moving right along.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out a couple of things there, and of course drying was another thing that we pioneered, and we brought in some modified tobacco dryers out of North Carolina, and everything, like I said, to that point had gone pretty well.
Okay.
And as we started shopping around for extractors, it just became very clear that we weren't going to be able to find any way to work with any of those guys, because we felt like we were giving half of the value away that we had worked very hard to put together. And of course, a lot of them scoffed at us with what they considered meager CBD values.
Can you talk about the toll processing? Like, how does that work?
Yes. Toll processing has kind of, taken off and now died down again, it seems. It depended on the company and what the circumstances were. Mm-hmm. But generally it was a 40 to either a 40-60 or a 60-40 split. Somewhere in that range was generally the norm with the processor. So
who gets the higher end of that?
The middle ground there, well, that's Generally speaking, if you had an extractor that had a high efficiency extraction method, CO2 for instance, then they expected to get 60%. Those who were using, ethanol or even propane and some other options that I think have kind of gone by the wayside at this point, or hopefully have, then your split was higher, but then it was questionable quality what you got back at the same time.
Right.
And with that, one of the other complaints that I have heard and read about is, how do you know what they say they got out of the process is what they actually yielded, which is another fun part. I mean, it's really hard to have transparency through that.
Because they could pretty much tell you anything they want to, right?
Yes. Well, and they want to protect, I'm an entrepreneur just like anybody else, and there are things we work very hard to develop that I'm not exactly ready to just share with the world because we feel that it's a competitive advantage, and again, they have that right to protect those things, but there's just under that circumstance, there's a lot of question marks there anyway. So we moved forward and we found a way to get a crop in the ground in 2019. We contracted with a number of other farmers and planted a fair amount of our own, and we had a mixed bag from all over the spectrum, from almost crop failure to our best grower this year. Our best guess is that he yielded about 3,200 pounds to the acre.
Wow.
So which far exceeded anything that we had seen. Even our yield, the yield from the previous year varied dramatically from field to field, and anybody who was in that area during 2018 knows just how much rain we got and how abysmal that entire harvest season was.
We had so much rain in 2018, and then last year was pretty well perfect. So
what we ended up with is, after shopping around for a number of extractors trying to turn 2018's crop into cash, we just couldn't find an extractor that would treat us what I would consider fairly. The only one that we had any sort of traction with is a company out of Kentucky, Atalo Holdings. But of course, they were in the kind of the same scenario, and they were going through some growing pains, and it just became very clear that we weren't going to get our product pushed through that channel either. And so I had been playing with an infusion idea for a couple of years, and I went back to that and spent a little more time and kind of had a breakthrough, and then we figured out we could scale it. And now Berkshire Hemp is our label, I guess. Exodus Infusions is what we're calling the company that handles the de facto extraction. So
can you talk about that Exodus Infusion? Can you talk about the method, or is that something that you feel is proprietary?
Well, I mean, I won't go into, intimate detail there, but basically the way in contrast to the typical extraction methodology, we directly infuse the cannabinoids straight into the carrier oil. And we basically manipulate, it's for a long way around, or easy way to describe it is it's a modified cooking method, really.
Okay.
And we're able to reasonably concentrate the cannabinoid profile to match what is commercially available on the market today. So our best results so far have been just under 1,200 milligrams for a 30 milliliter bottle. So okay. That's right in line with what everybody else's is. But we one of the advantages that we feel that there is to our product is because it's a relatively gentle process, and we literally take whatever the ratio is in the flower is what shows up in the oil. So if there's relatively high amounts of CBG, it's going to show up in the oil, and that's exactly what has happened. So we have a number of lesser cannabinoids, and we also are carrying some of the terpenes all the way to finished product.
Now, have you gotten feedback from consumers of this? How do they feel the, sort of the effectiveness of the product is compared to other things?
Everybody who, and I have to admit, and this is one of the misnomers that is kind of on the market right now. Am I one of those believers that that says that CBD is the end all be all, for medicine?
I don't know.
For me, it's not.
Yeah.
There are certain advantages. I have plenty of other. For instance, one of the guys who drove for a number of or hauled for a number of the contracted farmers had crushed his knee a few years ago in a logging accident.
Ouch.
And he had tried every opioid under the sun and whatever else. And he, on a whim, because I gave him a bottle, he tried it. He describes himself as a walking billboard for our product. We had another gentleman, older guy, who had some neck problems, had a couple of vertebrae fused last year. Again, was on a number of opioids and had gotten off of the opioids by purchasing a 3,000 milligram CBD bottle, and that was actually working for him. But it was a straight CBD product. In other words, it was made from isolate. So there was no entourage effect. He's claiming that our product actually works better than the product that he had been using. Okay,
so it seems like your method of infusion is, just seems just fine, right?
Yes. Well, and we send all of our stuff through a third party, both sampling and testing. We use a third party bottler.
Okay.
So he bottles it, sends one of the bottles to SE Labs in California. I probably prefer Perverti. I think that their COA layout is easier to read than SE Labs is.
Okay.
But Perverti, unfortunately, I can't get results back as timely. So that was the reason why we chose the lab that we did. I think they're just about equal on reputation as far as consistency and reliability. But after that, along with that testing, one of the other steps that we take that there's a lot of information out there that says this part can't be done. We dry heat sterilize all of our oil. What that means is we take it to 350 degrees for a full hour, and that should kill. We're literally immersing biomass into an oil. Well, I can't possibly say that there is not some sort of a, bug dropping or whatever else that is stuck on one of those leaves in the pounds of the material that we put in. No different than, same thing when you buy any greens in a grocery store.
Yeah, it's extra protein in there on your...
Occasionally you're gonna find something else in there. That's just the way it is. But that was our solution to try and provide a little more security and protection for both the company and our consumers. We wanted to make sure that what we put out there, and of course, through the full gamut of testing that SE Labs conducts, they look for microbials and heavy metals and all that other good stuff too.
Right.
So we start with an organic product, and we are going to have an organic product at some point, but we are not, right now we haven't procured the right oil. The grapeseed oil, if you put an organic sticker on it, for whatever reason, inflates about 10 times over. So
could you infuse it in a hemp seed oil?
We will eventually. My problem with hemp seed oil, and quite honestly, I'm also interested in olive oil. The problem with both of those is their smoke point just isn't high enough to tolerate the dry heat sterilization step. So for hemp seed oil, I think it's 330, and olive oil, unfortunately, depending on the process that they garnered the oil, that smoke point can move all over the map. So it would be really unfortunate to extract a few kilos worth of CBD and then have the oil smoke out on you to where it's not really usable. And so we'll do some more testing on that as it goes, and we have some other ideas that we're going to try and implement in the future. But for right now, grapeseed oil is going to, and quite honestly,
Right.
we're in the big portion of our grow is either in or near the Finger Lakes region in New York, which has a whole number of vineyards anyway. Right now, most of those grape
Right.
seeds just go to, compost. We would like to start developing some relationships there, and we think some of our seed separation technology from the hemp side is actually going to pay dividends in order to clean up the grape seeds and make that possible for us to literally be able to get local oil, which is what we want to be able to do. We're also looking at sunflower seed oil, but that's another option.
Are you familiar with Susquehanna Mills? They're a company up there, I guess, in like Muncie. They're in Pennsylvania, in the upper Susquehanna.
I can't say that I am.
Well, their owner is a guy named Josh Leidecker. He's been on the show before because he's a hemp grower as well.
Okay.
But they press all kinds of different seed oils, so it might be worth checking out. I know they do sunflower, they do hemp. I think they even do pumpkin seed oil.
Okay.
So just something to think about.
Yeah, I will definitely be. And I so far I have not seen we've extracted or infused, I guess, an olive oil, hemp seed oil, grapeseed oil, and coconut oil, and I have not seen a substantial difference between them. So as far as their performance of actually doing what we need the oil to do in our process. So
yeah, well, so we've talked a couple of times before this interview, and you've got some sort of concerns about the industry, sort of along the same lines that I have, concerns about the farmers getting the short end of the stick. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because it seems like farmers are kind of getting the short end of the stick on selling their biomass, right?
Well, it's not just that, but part of the reason why I really looked at hemp and decided to take the plunge with this, and why I believed in it, is because I looked at it as an opportunity to reset the stage in what otherwise seems like a broken agricultural market. And it seems like whether you're talking about milk or eggs or any of the grain commodities, everything's been commoditized to a point now that it seems that the folks who are actually producing it, there just isn't enough of the profits, if you will, that are making it all the way to the bottom of that chain.
Right.
It seems like the middle guys, unfortunately, are the ones that remove most of those profits before it ever trickles down to the farmer. And that I was hopeful that because hemp has so much diversity as far as fiber, construction materials, CBD, the oil, the potential food source, yada yada yada, that there would be enough opportunities there to hopefully decentralize some things and move more towards an agrarian model, to where in agricultural areas we weren't just producing a commodity, but an actual, some sort of saleable good. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it seems that hemp is rapidly going down the same route as what dairy has, and that's the one that I use most commonly to describe this, because one of our partners is actually involved with the company, and one of our growers this year both sold their herds off. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen the price of milk fall.
No.
But
nope, I think it's going the other direction.
Yeah, they were losing money on every cow they owned for the last 2 years, holding on for some sort of spike in the market, and we're basically seeing the exact same thing play out now in hemp. And we've got what kind of woke me up, and it's not that I didn't suspect this, but I guess I hadn't taken the time. We all get busy with our own stuff and kind of get tunnel vision, I guess. I sat at a NOFA conference a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of great information, provided there, but there was also what almost appeared to be a lobbying effort, and it took me a while to figure out or to put the pieces together of what was happening. Cornell described, based on their inputs, that an acre of CBD hemp would cost an average farmer about $13,000 to put in. Anybody who's been in the hemp industry for any amount of time knows that there is no such thing as an average yield yet. There's too many unknown factors, and that bounces all over the place. But most guys would consider it a success if you yielded 1,000 pounds of usable biomass from each acre. Well, right now you're lucky to move biomass at $10 at 10% CBD. Well, if it's going to cost you $13,000 and you're only going to get $10,000 at the end of the year, why would you do it? And at the same time, while the biomass has been falling, to utter, kind of hopeless lows, we haven't really seen the price fall on the retail side.
No, not at all.
So again, so early in this industry, we already have this disconnect. And what I guess really got my attention was there was one of the hemp middlemen, if you will, that was literally upset about the fact that retailers were, expecting to double their money. In other words, for a 1,000 milligram bottle, they would buy it wholesale at 50 and then put it on the shelf at 100. And although there certainly is probably a discussion to be had there, I kind of knew what the numbers were, and for them to be, shaming somebody else for making too much money when I knew pretty close to where the numbers were for him, that just seemed just wrong.
So wait, the processor was complaining that the retailer was marking it up too much and making too much money, but the processor himself was also doing that.
The processor himself was doing it far worse. At $10 a pound now, and a 1,000 milligram bottle, each one of those bottles, out of the $100 retail, 45 cents of that is going back to the farmer.
Okay.
And that's at extremely conservative numbers. And granted, they're actually losing money at that rate. I take that back. The farmer is making 34 cents. It's costing him 45 on a 1,000 milligram bottle. The processor is selling wholesale at 50, and it's costing them $6.38. So they have a 684% markup. The farmer's losing 23%, and they're complaining about the 100% that the retailer's making.
And wouldn't you think also by pricing it so high, it sort of like prices out potential customers?
Consumer Reports put out a fairly in-depth assessment, I guess, of the industry. It's long been known that retirees have, they have the most discretionary expenses because they don't have any of the other things. They're not paying for a house normally anymore, yada, yada, yada. Only 15% of seniors have even purchased a CBD product. The number one reason why is because the prices are too high. And the number two reason is because they don't trust what's out there. And they're just, I go on a number, I have found a number of different websites that the ones that actually do have COAs posted. I've found 3 different websites that have COAs posted with more than a 0.3% THC posted on their finished product. And one of the recently, it does appear that there are a few others that are looking at this, but one of the things that I've read in multiple places early on, and I was actually a veterinary technician and worked in the veterinary pharmaceutical business for about 20 years. So I'm somewhat familiar with pharmacology and some of the other lingo, I guess. So some of that makes more sense to me than what it probably would for most in the public, I guess.
Sure.
So I was familiar with what first pass effect means. And what that basically says is that your liver basically screens everything that you digest before it goes to the rest of your body. And for whatever reason, your liver normally will screen out most cannabinoids. So, and it literally puts it right back into your digestive tract to be eliminated later. So what at the end of the day, depending on whose research you're looking at, as much as 94% of the cannabinoids that you actually ingest don't ever actually circulate in your body.
Okay. Therefore,
it should bring into real question, what is the efficacy of capsules? But yet everybody wants to sell them, or the better one, and you can do a whole bunch of different research on this. It does seem that this seems to be diminishing, but the whole idea of CBD water was just about the most amazing thing I've ever heard. The reason why all of your CBD bottles should be, if it's somebody who's done their homework, it should be in a dark bottle that prevents ultraviolet light from penetrating the bottle.
Okay.
Because it causes the CBD to degrade. Well, if you take CBD isolate, and there is a way they can manipulate that to make it, it's not water soluble, but it'll mix into water, we'll call it that.
Okay.
First of all, CBD isolate is, by what little bit of literature there is, seems to be the least stable of its states, I guess. So if you take that CBD isolate and put that into a clear liquid in a clear bottle, is there any wonder why none of the third-party testers who have tested, purchased CBD water bottles have ever found any measurable CBD in those bottles?
So it's just a crock of shit.
And then basically, they wonder why seniors won't buy CBD.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of twofold why the market doesn't seem to be growing anymore is because we have too many bad actors. We're not policing ourselves.
Do you think that like the marijuana stigma has any play in there in the minds of these older consumers who are choosing not to buy CBD?
I think it probably does.
Yeah.
But that's something that we've kind of invited ourselves. I mean, most of the quote-unquote experts in the CBD market claim to have, 15, 20 years of experience growing hemp, except that wasn't legal. So where did your experience come from? It came from the THC side.
Right.
And, people aren't that stupid, contrary to what most, many seem to feel. And it just it sows that initial distrust right out of the gate. I've said many, many times, the most unfortunate thing that has happened to the hemp industry was the term medical marijuana.
Yeah.
But most of the medical part is actually in the hemp. I mean, there are some good things about THC. I'm not going to rain on those guys' parade on that one. There's some things that I had to learn. To be honest, it's simpler for me to say THC bad, CBD good. That's not the whole story.
No, there's a whole lot more nuance than that.
Yes,
yeah.
There's a lot of other things to get in there, but hemp still contains some THC.
Sure.
And by most of what we know right now, as far as affecting most people, there's enough THC in that hemp to provide the same benefits that they like to describe under medical marijuana.
Right.
For those who are seeking specifically, pain relief, appetite stimulant, those sorts of things, that's for a doctor to discuss. And just like I described before, I mean, CBD doesn't seem to have the same effect on me that it does on some other people around me. So, and we know that from other drugs. I mean, all drugs do that.
Right.
Well, the way a certain drug impacts one individual, at the end of the day, we're still individuals. So it's not necessarily anything that we can put into sort of a cookie cutter scenario. And that, as is often the case, the devil is in the details, and it doesn't seem that we're having an adult conversation about those details right now. We're just kind of distracted, I guess.
Yeah.
By a whole bunch of other things that don't seem to be actually what we should be focused on. And that's, again, where there's a big debate right now that the USDA and their rules on holding strong to a 0.3 THC ceiling is going to somehow hurt the business.
And what do you think of that?
I can't disagree with that more. I can't disagree with that more. I mean, currently, and again, going back to the example that I provided before, out of a 10% CBD flower, out of 1 pound, any extractor worth their salt, which means 65% extraction efficiency, is going to get at least 29,000 milligrams out of that 1 pound of flour. So that means it's going to make 29 of those 1,000 milligram bottles out of 10%. And they say that it's barely profitable. Well, and again, that's only paying $10 a pound for the biomass. If that was only 5%, that means that they only get roughly 14 bottles, because we'll just work with whole bottles so that it's easy to follow through. And they were still paying $50, or if they were paying $50 a pound for that same flour, they still make more than a 3x return on investment. So that 5% is, as far as keeping under 0.3, is very doable for anybody who has any sort of responsible genetics whatsoever.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of people disagreeing with you on that.
Well, I mean, it's simple math. I mean, there's 454 grams in a pound. So at 5% of that is 22.7 grams. If you take 65% for your efficiency rate at that point, you're going to end up with about 14 grams or 14,000 milligrams. Even if it costs them $30 a pound, of which you can currently contract an extractor to fully process, not just extract, but to actually refine their crude, depending on which direction which extraction process they're using. But you could go all the way to the most expensive product on the market right now, which is tea-free, for roughly $30 a pound. You can pay an extractor to do that. So I fail to understand, and at that rate, I mean, your grand total investment for that 1 pound of biomass is a whopping $150. And you still produced 14 of these bottles. It's pretty hard to argue with the math, and it just amazes me. And again,
I think there are a lot of growers who are into it for more than just the math. Yes. Like I think there's like sort of a quality that they want to grow a higher quality crop.
Well, but
right?
there's nothing.
So I think that raising the THC level is sort of more about that, like having these genetics that do oftentimes go above the 0.3, but they don't get much higher than that.
But I mean,
so I don't know. I think the push to raise that THC level is to sort of protect the farmers in the CBD industry.
That is certainly one of the arguments. But right now, even with, I mean, technically we're under or most states have been operating under what they're proposing to move forward with. Mm-hmm. So it's either a 0.3 Delta 9, or they want earlier sampling, or you want to, grind up the whole plant, however they want to manipulate that to keep the status quo in place.
Right.
Because quite honestly, we haven't been growing according to what the USDA, at least what they said. And this is one of the other things that has always kind of brought a question to me, I guess, was everybody, when you sell CBD seed, for instance, or look at any of the brochures that are out there, they'll advertise this as, for instance, 14% CBD, 0.2% THC. Well, when you look at the COA of the biomass that they give for that example, it's the CBDA times, 0.877, plus the total CBD in that flower. That's what your CBD number is. That's where the 14 came from. But the THC, you only counted the Delta 9 portion.
Right.
And you ignored
the THCA.
The THCA. So how can you use both of those numbers to provide the value and then only half of that number to legitimize it?
I see what you mean.
I mean, it just seems like a disingenuous conversation from the very beginning. And as far as the quality on the farmer's end, there still needs to be that strive on the CBD side for the cleanest biomass, the stuff that is harvested right. We've already proven that you can grow reasonable CBD concentrations in a pollinated environment, which also means that I don't have to care, as long as I have a reasonable source of seed, whether my neighbor decides to get into the hemp fiber business, which means I don't have to advocate for all of these halo laws, which, growing up in the Midwest, land rights are one of the things that we take pretty seriously. You work hard for the farm that you have, and to be told what you can or can't grow because of what your neighbor is growing seems like a non-starter to most of what our values are as those in who farm. We take care of our farms, and we want to be able to run them in an ethical, real way. I mean, if we're dumping whatever down the creek and it bothers somebody else's property, then that's an irresponsible action. I don't think choosing to grow fiber hemp is an irresponsible action.
No, I don't think it is either. No.
That's a bridge that we're going to have to cross in the future.
So what you're saying is you don't worry about pollination. You're going to, your plants will get pollinated, they'll produce seed, and you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you use that as part of the biomass, or do you get the seeds out of there? Or?
No, we devised our own method of, and there are others.
That's right. You said that earlier. Yep.
Yeah. No, we have a way of removing that, and ultimately that was what our goal was from the very beginning. Ideally, what I and this is probably an idealistic goal. Nobody can really tell me whether this is possible or not, but my ideal scenario is to develop a genetic variety that actually provides diversity in the market in the same field, to where you actually have usable, fiber, usable grain, along with usable cannabinoids. And as a veterinary technician, going back to the dairy industry again, the most popular drugs that are used in the dairy industry are anti-inflammatories. Well, what's CBD's big claim to fame?
Yeah, there you go.
So it'd be a non-drug, and we know that just on in feedlot situations, we know that providing analgesic or anti-inflammatory drugs during high stress scenarios actually reduces illness and increases growth rates. So again, I want to see this turn into a scenario to where we actually have use for large amounts of CBD,
right?
Not just a few acres here or there that only a very few can afford to actually plant, and then lock everybody else out of the industry. There should be a whole scope of things. And I'm not taking away from those who, again, I'm not against, medicinal marijuana or any of that. For those who want to go into that sort of a scenario, more power to you. I'm not trying to stop anybody else. I just want to, I guess I'm more concerned about, are the doors staying open for those who want to fill the other gaps, I guess.
Right.
And the more open this is, the more opportunity there is for innovation and growth. And our biggest shortage right now, and again, this is the number 2 reason why the market's not growing, is they don't trust what's there. And we don't trust a lot of things anymore. And it just doesn't seem to me that regardless of the amount of regulations that are put on things, that doesn't instill trust.
Right.
Because people still get around them. At the end of the day, oftentimes the biggest players have ways around those rules.
Well, yeah.
And the rest of us have to deal with them and play by them, and it just...
Wait, are you talking about the government here, or are you talking about just the hemp industry?
All of the above.
Industrial hemp.
It's the convergence of the two. And
yeah.
I mean, that's one of the ugly things that I'm starting to see in New York, is that these insane profits are being made, and you can see them if you look at it through this lens.
Yeah.
It's overtly obvious that there is a tremendous amount of lobbying money that is being put into play to set regulations to secure their current stance in this industry indefinitely. And it's not going to allow for further growth. The farmers are already starving under this scenario. It's not going to get better. There is nothing that they can say by increasing it's increasing the THC level, that it is going to make it better for the farmers. It's going to make it better for a few of the farmers that were selected by, basically it makes the processors the kingmakers.
All right, that's Jay Stucky. He's a hemp grower in New York State. I'll have a link to his business, berkshirehemp.farm, on the Lancaster Farming page for this episode. All right, so not everyone thinks the 0.3% THC limit is great for farmers. In fact, the American Farm Bureau Federation has recently added the idea of raising the THC to 1% to its sort of policy agenda. I wanted to talk to somebody at Farm Bureau about that, and the person I talked to is their hemp expert. His name is Scott Bennett, and I caught up with him while he was in Mississippi. Okay, Scott Bennett, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
Absolutely, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so where are you right now?
So I'm actually at the Dixie National Livestock Show in Jackson, Mississippi. So I apologize to you if you hear some background noises, some cattle bellowing, but the show is underway here.
All right. Thanks for the heads up. So you're the Director of Congressional Relations at the American Farm Bureau Federation.
Correct. And that's we do all of the federal policy work there in Washington, D.C., and we represent the 51 member state of Farm Bureaus.
And you're also the policy expert on industrial hemp at Farm Bureau.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. All right, so I read in Lancaster Farming newspaper that last month Farm Bureau had the annual convention to discuss the policy agenda for the year, and delegates voted to support a higher THC level in industrial hemp. Can you talk about why this was important to your members?
So in Austin, Texas, at our annual meeting, we had some robust discussion on hemp. Prior to this year, the American Farm Bureau policy just simply stated that we support industrial hemp. Well, with the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill and the fact that hemp is now legal and we have an interim final rule at USDA, it was important that we took a further look at how we support the hemp industry and where our policy leads. We had several kind of larger ticket policy changes or policy adoptions, rather. And one of those is that American Farm Bureau supports hemp THC levels up to 1%. And as you well know, currently right now it's 0.3% THC. Delta 9 is what was passed in the Farm Bill. I've had a lot of questions. Is American Farm Bureau going to go hit the hill and start lobbying for 1% THC? The answer to that is no. When we passed this through our policy, it was more or less because we know the conversation is there. We would argue that at times the 0.3% THC level is a little bit strict. And in order to provide that flexibility for our farmers and producers of hemp, having policy that says we support it up to 1% allows us to be in the room and be an engaging member of the conversation if that were to change in the future. There's a couple other kind of key aspects of policy changes, one being the 15-day testing window prior to harvest.
Right.
We passed policies stating that we support up to 45 days testing prior to harvest. And that, again, mainly is to provide more flexibility for our farmers to get that test done and to the lab and have results back with ample time to still harvest the crop.
So while this isn't going to be a great lobbying push, you just wanted to leave the door open for future conversations.
Absolutely. And some other organizations, some other trade associations have supported similar policy. I have already discussed this with Undersecretary Ibaugh at USDA, and he is well aware of our policy. I've spoke to members on or staff on the House Agriculture Committee, and they think it's a positive thing as well as they kind of look at this. Again, it just allows us to be in the room as people talk about, where THC limit levels go from here.
How about Mitch McConnell? Where's he at on this?
Industrial hemp.
Yeah, we haven't had any direct conversations with any member offices on this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't speak for him or any other member, but again, the premise that we supported 1% THC is just that it would allow some flexibility for farmers. Because look, at 0.3% THC, there's a lot of angst in the countryside that crops will be hot. Our objective by passing, let's pretend that the THC level is now 1%. I don't think that farmers are going to try and push that limit. Mm-hmm. It's just simply that if they have a crop that comes in at 0.4 or 0.5% THC, they can rest easy at night and know it's still legal.
Right. Great. So as hemp has sort of come online in the past year or so, have you seen sort of an influx of membership to Farm Bureau with new farmers?
So I can't speak directly to that because we represent the 51 member states. So it's the 50 states in Puerto Rico are all members of the American Farm Bureau Federation. Mm-hmm. But certain states, certainly this has piqued their interest. I communicate regularly with our state members, our state members and staff of those state farm bureaus. Yes, the short answer to your question is yes. I know in some New England states, some states that have been very active on the hemp front, they have seen a growth in membership as new farmers get into hemp. It's the first time they've ever been engaged as a farmer, and so they see value in joining their state farm bureau because they know, for whatever state it is, that farm bureau is at the state legislature, making sure the state puts together a state plan that works for them, and also we at American Farm Bureau are there making sure that USDA and Congress creates policy that's beneficial for the success of this crop.
All right, there you go. Scott Bennett, I appreciate your time.
Hey, absolutely, Eric. Thank you so much.
Yep, have fun at that livestock show.
All right, take care.
Well, there's a lot going on in this episode, a lot to think about, maybe a lot to comment on. If you heard anything that you agree with or disagree with, don't hesitate to let me know. Send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. I would love to hear your feedback. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, and that pretty much does it for me today. We've got a lot of neat shows coming up, working on some good interviews, and there are a lot of hemp events happening in the area, probably your area too. I'll try to do a calendar of those items next week. But this week, I'm going to head to the PASA conference in Lancaster. It's the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, so maybe I'll see you there. There's a lot of great hemp stuff going on. But otherwise, until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Episode 71 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music throughout the show is provided courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.